We're talking the latest news from around spring training and our updates to the top 300 fantasy baseball rankings here on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. Welcome to the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast. We are brought to you by Fantrax. I'm RotoWire Senior Editor Clay Link here with FSWA Hall of Famer Todd Zola. Got a lot to get to, so we'll just dive right into it. Some good news to start before we get to some injuries, Todd. My guy Joey Votto has found a new home, which coincidentally is his old longtime home in Toronto. Minor league deal, but I have to think Joey has a pretty good chance to head north with the club.
And then even more north. I mean, I'm not lowering Vlad my ranks. Nice story. We'll see. Who was Toronto going to have DHing? They were going to just rotate guys.
Was it
through.
Justin Turner and
Justin?
Yeah. Did they have a Vogel back too? I think.
Yeah, you know what? Yeah, so it was Turner that I was thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
Right, their issues at second and third, and Turner can fill in at both, but really not play. So it's a goodwill gesture. Whether he breaks camp or not, I guess it does remain to be seen because he's only going to be a pinch hitter. I don't think Toronto's a team that wants to waste a roster spot out of goodwill. They're trying to win.
True, but yeah, now having the veteran presence of not only Justin Turner but now Joey Votto, I don't think that could be a bad thing. Although it does kind of leave Daniel Vogelback, who's on an NRI deal. It leaves him kind of up in the air as far as where he'll land to start the season. But glad to see Joey's got a home now. He posted that sad pic on the bench earlier this week, and I was hoping he'd land somewhere. And Vladdy Jr. does have a jammed thumb. I don't think this is really, they don't think they signed Votto as a direct correlation or a direct result of this Vladdy injury, but something to keep in mind that Vlad Jr. does have a jammed thumb right now. And there was word that the market for Votto was, kind of heating up there. Some contending teams in the mix before the Blue Jays swept in. I have to think one of those might have been the Rangers because Nathaniel Lowe has an oblique strain, not expected for opening day. They're dealing with some injuries, the world champs. They got Seager banged up. Now Nathaniel Lowe looking like he's going to start the season on the injured list. Maybe Jared Walsh steps in. But this definitely knocks Lowe down a fair amount.
Right. Remember, Josh Young is hurt too.
Yeah, that's right.
We did our rankings. They'll probably be posted as we're talking.
Mm-hmm.
Had a knock Nate. Is it Nate or Nathaniel? I never remember. I think he's back to Nathaniel, right?
Yeah, I think he's back to Nathaniel. That's what we have him as anyway.
Yeah, all right. So knocked him down. It was somewhat arbitrary because we're not really sure yet, but I knocked him down 20 spots, and we'll talk about Lars Nootbaar similarly. But Texas has bodies. Ezekiel Duran is now going to fill in at 3 spots on opening day, right? He's
yeah. He's going to be probably floating around jumping around the diamond a lot.
Yeah, but you're right. Walsh has played some first base before. Does this help Wyatt Langford make the club? Yeah. Although, you know what though? I mean, I don't think you have him make the club for an opening that send him down. If he makes the club, I think he earns it. I don't think it's because there's a roster spot.
Yeah, he's going to have to earn it because he has such limited experience in professional ball. He was drafted last year, right? So I kind of thought, and I said on this podcast a few weeks ago, I thought it was pretty unlikely, but maybe these injuries combined with his hot spring end up, jumping him. And I'm not really the high man on Langford this year, but I have him 278, so just inside my top 300. But people are getting real aggressive. I guess it's a change from the norm because I'm usually the guy who's jumping these young kids higher than they probably should be.
Well, when you jump them, though, they have a job.
True.
The ones that you've been aggressive on, it's just, and maybe if Langford had a job, you'd have him in the 260s. I don't know. But I put him around where you had him. I had him outside, but with the news, and I don't think it should matter. the injuries, like again, either he's on the team due to his merit or is not, because I don't think you want to send him back down. But anyway, an interesting dilemma the World Series champions have, and like I said, Duran's an interesting guy to draft early, and then use him while he's playing, and then decide what to do with him afterwards.
Yeah, I'm kind of licking my wounds from this Nathaniel Lowe injury because I just drafted him in TGFBI. It's kind of a blow. Who did you get at first base in TGFBI? Do you remember?
I don't remember, but keep talking and I'll let you know.
Well, I have Josh Bell in the corner spots. I'm going to have to move him in, but it looks like I might have to add a corner guy in the fab period before the start of the season. That's never fun when you're already planning fab moves.
At least we have one. I'm in a league where the fab is into the second week of the season. So you're taking some zeros.
Ooh. Yeah, I wouldn't like that. I got a Med Rosario in the reserves, who I kind of like, but I may need to add a corner bat. So that's not how I especially wanted to start my Friday, but that's all right. Lars Nootbaar, you mentioned, diagnosed with 2 non-displaced fractures in his left rib cage.
Yeah,
this is going to take him out almost certainly for the start of the year. Although I saw that the Cardinals not necessarily ruling him out for opening day, but Tommy Edmonds also hurt, so the Cardinals going to be a little understaffed to start the season. And Nootbaar was a guy I liked, but I had to lower him significantly just because there's so many guys in that range who I kind of like that. Now with this injury, I just jump one of those guys up a little bit and leave Nootbaar for somebody else, most likely.
Again, without anything to go on, I dropped him 20 spots. It could be more, could be less. I think that without knowing, I think that's fair. You mentioned guys in the range. There's also a lot of guys on the Cardinals that can fill in.
True.
So any setback at all, and he loses some playing time. To answer your previous question, my first baseman, TGFBI, a guy you probably haven't heard of this guy. So if you need some information, he's a kid out of Cincinnati called Christian Encarnacion Strand.
Oh, nice. CES.
Yeah, no. Yeah. So I got him in the 11th, and I have Bell as well in the 19th as my corner. I like waiting on. I mean, it's not that I like Bell. I like Bell at that price as a corner. I think he'll, relative to the draft spot, I think it's pretty good. But yeah, I'm safe early, take chances later. If CES is a chance at number 11, then that's letting my hair down.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like that pick. That's that raw power he has is just out of this world. So I think he'll be able to get to it in games and be a pretty nice fantasy player for you. But with Tommy Edman also out, we're looking at Dylan Carlson, who's kind of an afterthought at this point. He's really struggled with injuries and performance the last couple of years, but over 50 extra base hits in 2021 as a 22-year-old. You think there may still be something here? You thinking about maybe taking a flyer on Dylan Carlson?
Because he can play all 3 positions defensively in the outfield, he was going to get some playing time as the 4th outfielder. I don't know. There's like you kind of alluded to it. There's so many players of that ilk. I don't know. To me, he's not even some. And I believe in managing for today and dealing with tomorrow. So, like I mentioned with Duran, I will draft him over someone who's going to start maybe more games but not play as well when he does play. Carlson doesn't really do it for me. There's enough other outfielders that I'd rather take a chance on at that point. It does drop Nootbaar down for me. Edmund I've been looking at because I'm in you mentioned TGFBI. I'm in Rasball now, and Edmund has all that eligibility, a Raz Slam by Rasball. Hi Rasball. So I've been looking at Edmund, but I'm pushing him around because the news came out that he won't make opening day. So I'm hoping I can draft him next in Raz Slam. It's a best ball tournament. So all right, I lose him the first week or two, but you're able to draft replacements, and if you get him at a discount, maybe he's in the lineup the rest of the year.
Yeah, I kind of like the idea of maybe buying the dip on Edmund, especially if he slips to like the reserve rounds in future drafts to come. I'd love that. Eddie Rosario signed a minor league deal with the Nationals, although you got to think he's pretty much a lock to make that team, and they got to think that really hurts Jesse Winker's chances. Right. Winker's really, kind of been playing himself out of the league in recent years. But Rosario had a real nice year last year. 755 OPS. I think he's probably a starter between DH and in the outfield, left field.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a faint praise to say he's a good left fielder because it means he's terrible elsewhere. But he's not a bad left fielder. And isn't Washington's kind of an interesting team? They've got the youngsters and they have that outfield waiting in the wings, right? But they're kind of taking on some reclamation projects, beginning with maybe Joe and Meneses a couple of years ago. You mentioned Winker. You've got Nick Senzel. I got you up with Strand, and now, and Carson, I'm saying now bring you down mentioning Nick Senzel. But they seem to be, and they've got a third baseman on the way, but not just yet. So these are interesting. Rosario's not a reclamation project by any means, but it's kind of an interesting way they're building their lineup, waiting for the, Abrams has developed, Will Garcia developed, Ruiz has developed. We'll see who continues to develop, but I think it's an interesting way to build.
Same. And I definitely think what they're doing is interesting. And a guy who I really didn't know much about, but James Wood on this Nationals team.
Yep.
He might be playing himself into a roster spot. 1250 OPS, 3 homers this spring. Big old guy, 6'6", 234, play the outfield. I could see him being in this mix on opening day, James Wood. And Victor Scott II too. I'm sorry, he's on the Cardinals. I meant to mention him earlier, but he's another guy who's just kind of on my radar now. But James Wood, he's not played above AA, but what do the Nationals have to lose? And we'll see. We have Adam in the chat mentioned that he took Victor Scott in the 29th round of the Beat Jeff Erickson League. Definitely has some speed to be relevant in rotisserie leagues, but we'll see. And it's Victor Scott, by the way, of the Cardinals.
Victor Scott II.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a fab league, the RotoWire Online competition. So why not? You can drop him. You mentioned Wood. I know Wood because he's in the he's been drafted in the XFL, and he's kind of a singular version of a famous actor. So catches our eye, James Wood. I didn't know he played base. The dumb jokes we make when we're old. But then Dylan Cruz, another guy who could potentially crack. They said they have that great young outfield, and I think it's Brady House is the third baseman who I kind of alluded to. That's 20 years old. He's not coming up this year, but these reclamation Nixon Zilla is a year to see what he can do, and then may or may not Brady House be ready within a year or two, because Washington has shown that they will elevate their prospects pretty quickly. Maybe not successfully with Luis Garcia, but they're trying. They've shown they will do it. Yeah,
Luis Garcia got thrown into the deep end and has kind of struggled to stay afloat.
I think I'm not giving up yet. No. I mean, Abrams has developed. Carter Kaiboom just never materialized. That's why they have to get Senzel for the Nationals. Pitching, though, Gore, and I know we're kind of all over the place. We got news to get to, but we're on the Nationals. Gore and Gray, I don't think either of them are going to be an ace, but if they can develop a little bit this year, it's easier said than done, but they go out and get themselves an ace. And I think, I don't, we shouldn't be sleeping on the Nationals as an up-and-coming team.
Well, Todd, the second half of the show, we're going to be talking about our latest RotoWire roundtable, and that is going up, I believe, today. So we're all signed off on that. Top 350 rankings for myself, Todd Zola here, Jeff Erickson, and Eric Halterman compiled into a composite top 300 ranking. And I lowered Kevin Gausman, I think around pick 50 or 48, 50. But he says today that he's expected to be ready for opening day. He is battling shoulder fatigue. Now, a lot of times this time of year, guys just have, dead arm phase that they have to work themselves through. And again, Gausman now saying he'll be ready for opening day. Did you adjust his rank at all, or did you leave him be?
Keeping in mind, I was pretty much high man on Gausman and had him in several places. I think I had him for 30 starts anyway. So if I did only knock him down a start, which would probably knock him down a little bit, in the rankings. So the answer is yes, but I didn't go nuts with it. And I will, you mentioned buy the dip. I will, it's tough because if I wanted Gausman, it was early, late second, early third. And if I want a pitcher for strategy wise, I'm not going to take Gausman at that point. But if I do take a pitcher, I'm probably not going to take him where I have him lowered to. So, unless I get really frisky and say, you know what, I'm going to try to get Gausman with my next pick, so that's tough. I don't do nearly as many drafts as I used to, so I don't know what I'm going to be doing. But I see we got Underdog Best Ball mentioned in the chat. I'm about to dive in there, and if there's a dip on Gausman at all, I'll take him in the best ball, in Underdog Best Ball every time.
Yeah, I got him at 47, but if he continues to trend in the right direction, I may bump him back up. But
right. I would, if I'm taking him like at the 2-3 wheel, that would be 30, 28 to 33 in that range. So you knocked him down a round from where I had him, probably half a round from where you had him.
Yeah, I think that's warranted. But again, says he's going to be ready for opening day. We got to just take him at his word right now. But we'll wait and see. And then finally, the last bit of news I had here was that Brian Bayo got his contract extension. We talked about it a few weeks ago that there were rumors that they were working on a long-term deal. 6 years, $55 million for Bayo, in the mix to start for the Red Sox on opening day. Now, not a true frontline ace starter, but I'm pretty optimistic about Bayo. He was one of my core targets a few weeks ago, and while he's not really an ace, so to speak, I think he could have a nice year as a fantasy mid-rotation type.
Yeah, with the caveat being, and I sometimes have to remember this because I live in Boston. It gets kind of out of my eyesight, in that next to Coors, Fenway Park elevates runs more than any other park. So he's not if you get him to stream, it's A, not the best division, and B, not the best park. But if you trust him, that he's not a streamer for me, he's going to be in there, then yeah, pay for it. I think it's interesting that they bought him out of the arbitration years, 2 arbitration years. So when you try to compare it to contracts, you have to remember the next 2 years would have been a little bit light. And then the rest of it's just assuming what he was going to be making as his caliber of pitcher. That's why they do this, because it's a mix between team friendly and player friendly, because he's guaranteed the money. Sure, he could have gotten more, but he could also have gotten hurt or not played very well. I think it's interesting, but yeah, but as a Red Sox fan, if the debate is Pivetta or Bayo for opening day, well, not good.
Well, it's not going to be Lucas Giolito because he is facing a long-term absence, although he's getting a second opinion on the right elbow. But Tommy John's already being whispered, and partial UCL tear, so that's a big blow to the Red Sox. And we'll see if they make any other additions. But right now, as much as I like Bayo, and I actually like Cutter Crawford too, but hard to see this team being competitive in that division with this starting rotation.
Yeah, we were on the Sirius show. James and Eric were doing over-unders, and they saved the Red Sox for me. It was like 77.5, and I made sure none of my relatives were listening and said under.
I think that's probably the way to go. Well, we got a lot more to get to. We'll talk about our updated top 300 fantasy baseball ranks for 2024. But a quick word from our sponsor, Fantrax. Fantrax is the most customizable fantasy platform in the industry, offering the greatest fantasy experience for your dynasty, keeper, redraft, and best ball leagues. Coming from another service, Fantrax makes it easy. Fantrax can import any of your current leagues and customize if needed. Fantrax offers the most in-depth player pool in the industry, including minor league players. Do you need a customizable commissioner service for your fantasy league? Fantrax offers more customization than any other platform. Waivers, categories, scoring system, schedule. Fantrax offers custom solutions for all that and more, and it's all free. Sign up for free today and be entered to win an official MLB signed jersey from my boy, Vladimir Guerrero Jr. Simply go to fantrax.com/RotoWire and sign up today. That's FANTRAX.com/RotoWire. Fantrax, the home of fantasy sports. Love seeing Vladdy Jr. on the cover of MLB The Show. I'm sure Paul Spohr is look at his chops getting ready for that new release. And yes, it sure seems like the owners and creators of that game are confident that Vladdy will bounce back, as am I. Well, Todd, real quick before we get into our updated rankings, are you done in TGFBI? Is your draft wrapped up now?
Yes, wrapped up a couple of days ago. I think there's an unwritten rule that if you were in a fast TGFBI draft, you're in a slow RazSlam, and vice versa. The guys that got together, Justin and Resball, planned that, I believe. TGFBI, we kind of cruised. I'm not complaining. I'm making a bad joke. But your RazSlam is kind of actually. You know what? I don't mind that it's slow right now because I got so much to do. It's nice to not have to. Am I on the clock? Because when I am on the clock, I like to pick quick. But I don't mind if it took a long time to get to me.
Yeah, we just wrapped up ours the other day as well. I was pretty happy with how it turned out, although I do have that injury to Nathaniel Lowe already. I got a injury to Josh Lowe, so I should just stay away from Lowe's, I guess, on my team. But Josh Lowe sounds like he'll be fine.
Yeah.
I was happy at the end. I got AJ Puck in the reserves. I got Med Rosario in reserves. Sean Manaea, Wilyer Abreu, who I kind of like.
Yeah.
Gavin Stone, who could be the Dodgers' fifth starter. Luis Matos, and then Jared Jones at the end. Although they just signed Eric Lauer on a minor league deal. Maybe he steps into that rotation for the Pittsburgh Pirates. All right, Todd. Well, let's get into our updated top 300 fantasy baseball rankings for 2024. New roundtable going up today, rotowire.com/pod for a look behind the paywall, free access to that list, which includes rankings for myself, Todd, Jeff Erickson, and Eric Halterman. The guy, aside from Gausman high up that is a big follower for me is Blake Snell, just because at this point you have to assume he's starting in the minors, building up. And, maybe he's been doing something close to a normal spring training routine on his own, but still unsigned. Scott Boras is really putting teams to the coals on Blake Snell, and you got to dock him, I think, several starts.
Yeah, I don't know. I guess maybe I should have done that at this point. I'm guessing I'm giving it one more week to see, because I think, maybe if he doesn't start opener, he still starts that first week. But I was kind of low on him anyway, so it probably just brings him to where other people think he should be, similar with Jordan Montgomery. I think at this, JD Martinez, a little bit lower in the rankings, but you're right. I mean, I don't know. We should be talking about how the players do and not Scott Boras. So I'll leave that. I don't mind him doing his job. I think part of his job is to get the guys in camp, though. So I think that's the difference. So
maybe he's waiting for one more big injury, but it's like, yeah, at this point, it's going to be costing him regular season action, I have to assume, because he's going to need a build-up process.
Right. And I don't know, just rapport. Maybe I'm just way off because I'm just sitting at home on a Friday on a podcast and athletes don't care. But yeah, I just carry my bag of money, guys. I'm 2 weeks, 3 weeks late. Let's win. I don't know. I think it just doesn't. Maybe I'm overblowing that aspect of it. I don't know. They're professional athletes. They know the deal, perhaps. But yeah, Snell. And the other thing about Snell, I think more than Montgomery is, I want to know his landing point more so maybe than Jordan Montgomery, is just to know how to adjust. Although we've talked about Snell, and we first pitched last week. We talked a little bit more about Snell and how he put the ball in areas where weak contact was induced, but no one's confident that he'll be able to do it again. So he wasn't as unlucky, or wasn't as lucky as maybe number crunchers like me want to pretend, but it's a little odd that, all right, he was good enough to be in a groove, to put the ball in these areas where it induces weak contact, but we don't trust he could do it again. There's just kind of a disconnect from my mind.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I hear you. I definitely hear you on that. Another guy who's fallen in my rankings, Sonny Gray. He's got the big 2 red arrows down. He's got the mild hamstring strain. They're saying it would be challenging for Sonny Gray to be ready for opening day. So I'm just assuming that means he's not going to be ready. A right hamstring strain for Sonny. And it's just kind of a reminder that he's had these health issues over the years. Did get to 184 innings last season, but before that had not broken, 150, but once since 2015. So I went ahead and lowered him to outside the top 150, Sonny Gray. So 156 for me. Are you pessimistic that Sonny will be ready for the start of the season?
Well, you mentioned TGFBI. I have Gausman as my top starter and Gray as my third.
Ooh.
So, yeah, well, I'm sweating a little
You
bit.
should be fine.
We got Eflin in between, and I did draft a couple of closers. Good, so we'll see. But, right, I mean, I was, a little bit higher on Gray, but I didn't have him projected for 30 starts. I think I may have knocked him down 1 or 2 for this update. I'm not 100% sure, but, again, maybe it's just I was a little higher on him. So it wouldn't be the opposite as before. And I think he knows his body. And it sounds to me, if you're going to be the opening day starter and you miss 10 days, you're kind of only missing 1 start because you're starting in the second time through, if you will. So, yes, I'm nervous, but we'll have to see how it goes. I'm hoping one of the two between Gausman and Gray doesn't miss too much time. It'll kind of even itself out.
Yeah, well, at least Gausman looks like you'll have him to start, but you may have to swap out Sonny Gray to start the season. But just somebody that I'm just less inclined to take now that he's already dealing with an injury. We don't, we joke about Justin Mason and that infamous main event team from several years ago, but you just don't really want to steer into the injuries. They're going to find you, so I typically don't love to. You draft a guy with a premium pick that's going to be hurt to start the year. Who's to say that he doesn't have a setback, kinetic chain? There's another injury. Who knows?
Yep.
So, Sonny Gray's definitely got to watch.
Draft. This wasn't because of the injuries, but just because I think it's the thing to do in an early draft with a fab before the season. In reserves, I loaded up with Anthony Desclafani, Adrian Hauser, Alex Cobb, Randy Vasquez. So I have arms to use it if I need to for a week. Chris Martin, a decent reliever at the time. Is Jansen going to be traded? And he's hurt. So I've got James McCarthy, Tyler McGill, who is looking pretty good for the Mets. So I kind of loaded up purposely, but you have no hitters to put in reserve. Well, talk to me the first fab. I may have a hitter or two.
Glad you mentioned Tyler McGill because I'm kind of back in now.
Yeah, why not?
Outing, he looks pretty darn good.
Yeah.
So him and Hayden Wesneski are 2 guys that I'm kind of sniffing around on again. Could be nice late round flyers if you need it. Well, Todd, one guy that I bumped up inside the top 200, and usually as a Reds fan, I'm a pessimist when it comes to their fantasy outlooks, but Will Benson, I bumped up inside the top 200. I love what he's showing this spring, and I just think he makes for a really interesting case. You and I were having a little discussion about Benson before the pod. You're not as sold, and I just think he's a tricky guy to evaluate because projection systems will understandably take into account his rough history of plate discipline. But it seemed like something clicked when he was in the minors last year because he came back, hit 296, 389, 542 with 34 extra base hits from May 30th onward. And I guess the question is just when can we judge the plate discipline and determine whether it's sticky or not? Like how much does Will Benson have to show before we kind of say that, okay, his plate discipline has indeed improved?
By the numbers, half a year. I don't know if we can actually put a number on it. It is, I mean, because it is something that you do as opposed to just kind of thing that levels out. It's something you want to do, right? I mean, whether you're able to do it or not, but because it's a skill you can control, something like, BABIP or something that takes forever because it's out of your control. Because this is in your control, there's a chance that it becomes real. And sometimes we just have to take a shot. The problem I had, not so much problem, I think it's kind of a good problem for the Reds. Jake Fraley and Will Benson, they're both lefties. So there's not a platoon. And I just think that if you give them each half of the playing time, it hurts them both in rankings of this nature. And that's and I kind of took a look to see when we're, kind of interested. All right, if everybody's high on Benson, are we knocking Fraley down? And we kind of, when you average everything out, we kind of have them equal, which means that you're a little higher on Benson and lower on Fraley. I'm a little higher on Fraley and lower on Benson. It kind of evens itself out. Now, if we knew it was one or the other, either one would probably be inside the top 250. But it's just not that way. And TJ Friedel's playing center, and he's showing some good things. And obviously, I think at this point, Spencer Steer is the left fielder. So it's either or with Benson or Fraley, which is, again, a kind of a nice problem to have if you're the Reds. But for a fantasy manager, it's not.
Yeah, true. Yeah, I do think maybe Jonathan India's, plantar fasciitis flare-up could maybe help solve things a little bit because, maybe Fraley's at DH.
Well, the Candelario.
Candelario too. Yeah, that's right.
So, unless Novelli Marte. There are a lot of what ifs.
Yeah, the Reds have a lot of moving parts.
Yeah, what if Marte isn't strong early and Candelario plays third? What if Strand and Narciso Strand? And Matt McClain is a little bit banged up. Mm-hmm. So isn't it kind of nice though as a Reds fan that there's someone, when someone gets hurt, there is an alternative. There was a time, especially at shortstop, where there weren't any alternative. Now we can the pitching. We were talking about the Red Sox starter. If Frankie Montas is your opening day starter, maybe we're hoping someone. Although Montas he's impressed the Reds camp with his more so with his mannerisms and the way he's taking to the guys under his wings more so than with his actual performance. The Reds have been very impressed with the sort of maturity that he's bringing to a younger fledgling staff. So I think that's interesting.
Yeah, I've heard that as well. And I've heard the pitchers, in the side sessions have been impressed. It hasn't really shown up on the field, but
right.
Good for him. And I'm not really drafting Montas, but I hope he does well, of course, as a fan. Sounds like Nick Lodolo almost certainly going to be out to start the season.
I'm a fan. I love watching him. And wow. Yeah,
it sucks because sorry to cut you off. I was just going to say because he had the stress reaction in the tibia, the left tibia, then the second stress reaction in the same tibia. Now it's still an issue, still not 100%. That's really scary.
Yeah, I loved the contrast between Green and Lodolo. I just thought that would be kind of cool for teams having to face that. We mentioned Montas, mentioned the Red Sox with Fenway Park. That's my problem. You mentioning not drafting Montas. It's tough. It's tough if you can't stream at home confidently. It's just a little tough. Although home field advantage is that's a different argument. It's not so much home field advantage to get that extra couple of percentage points of skills. It's Great American is just not a great place to pitch in general. Mm-hmm. So you don't have that comfort of so now do you stream him on the road? Milwaukee, again, not a great park, but the lineup's not great. The Cubs, we'll see what they do, but it's other than AL Central, it's probably one of the easier divisions to stream in.
Mm-hmm. True. Well, with Lodolo out, it sounds like, Nick Martinez, Graham Ashcraft, and Andrew Abbott going to round out that rotation. Something from C. Trent Rosecrans of The Athletic. It just kind of seemed like, Nick Martinez kind of higher in that order than we had him initially. So I raised him up in the depth chart, and it just seems like Nick Martinez is the guy they signed to be a starter. So whenever Lodolo's ready, it could actually threaten Andrew Abbott and not Nick Martinez. Although Martinez does have plenty of experience in that kind of swing long man role. And just back to Benson real quick, Will Benson. Sure. I just see latent upside here with the power. Now he is a lefty hitter, as you said, so it's not that really short porch out in left field at Great American Ballpark, but you still love the fit. He's got some speed too, so yeah, there are a lot of questions there, but I took him in TGFBI, and I'm pretty excited about what Will Benson could be if those plate discipline changes from last year end up sticking. Well, we've talked about some fallers. A guy who's rising on my list, Todd, Taj Bradley of the Tampa Bay Rays. He had a really good spring outing on Wednesday. He threw 3 innings against the Yankees, only 2 hits allowed, 1 strikeout. There was some hype around Taj Bradley when he first came up, but then, his performance a little up and down. Do you think this could be a guy who's a sleeper in plain sight, if you will?
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of similarity with Brian Bayo, but maybe a year behind as far as that goes. Plus you trust Tampa. Well, yeah, you have to remember the hype and how well Bradley was pitching before he came up. Just because, this is going to sound so dumb, just because a pitcher doesn't do well his first time through, it doesn't mean he won't figure it out. And he obviously has some talent, so I can see that. And you do have the parachute of pitching at the Trop as a nice place to pitch. So in a draft and hold scenario, I'm all about Taj Bradley. In AL Labor, as an example, where you're stuck with him, you can't take him out, he would not be on my list. He would not be a target. But any league where you can manage the pitching, I think Bradley is definitely someone to look at.
Yeah, you may not want to start him, in Yankee Stadium or in Toronto or whatever, but I definitely like what he brings to the table and love that team context. I was reading a little bit about the Rays' philosophy, and it's really actually very simple. It's just throw strikes. It's trust your stuff and throw strikes. And
yeah,
even though that's a very simple message, it's hard to get through to some people. It's hard to trust your stuff, frankly.
Yes, and they're also very good, and they're doing this with Aaron Savali. They're very, very good in not just trust your stuff, but knowing sequencing and knowing what stuff you should be trusting.
Mm-hmm.
And we were kind of Savali, we're expecting some regression. The strikeout rate, what are the Rays doing? They're having him throw a new pitch. So they're trying to get out ahead of some of the regression you can't control, but calm down some of the impending regression by increasing your. That's how you beat regression, is you increase your skills. So we're trying to increase our skills a little bit with Savali, and I may have been a little scared, but I'm no longer as scared when I hear the Rays are tinkering with your repertoire. I'm not scared.
Yeah, that's a team I trust to tinker properly. So yeah, definitely a guy that's on the rise for me. And Aaron Savali too is a guy who's rising. I did the same with Drew Rasmussen and Jeffrey Springs last year, pushed them up around this time.
Yeah.
And there have been a lot of talk lately about this rash of pitching injuries, and an article in The Athletic about some people sounding the horn about pitcher injuries. So the Rays are not alone in that regard, certainly.
Well, the Rays bring it upon themselves by kind of moneyballing. If moneyball means finding a market inefficiency, they take a chance on guys, injury-prone guys.
True.
And they run with them until they get hurt, and then once they're hurt, I think people are really trusting Ryan Pepio because he's on the Rays. Is he at the point where maybe there's too much? He's so underrated, he's overrated. Are we kind of at that point with Pepio? If not, we're close.
Yeah, it is getting pretty darn close to that with Pepio, and I kind of like, if you miss on him, I think Bradley or Savali, or I like Savali even more than Bradley, but I think one of those guys would be a real nice pick. All right, Todd. Well, one guy who's on the rise in a lot of leagues is AJ Puck for the Miami Marlins, formerly of the Oakland A's. And it seems like he's going to be in that rotation. When there was that report that he was going to be stretched back out, I was skeptical, of course, because he's had injury issues, seemed to find his niche in the bullpen. But with Braxton Garrett out, start the year with a shoulder issue, it does seem like Puck will be in. And friend of the show, Craig Mish, said that it actually appears that AJ Puck is now the heavy favorite to open as the number 3 starter. So, he's been impressive, and it looks like he's kind of technically ahead of Edward Cabrera and Trevor Rogers, at least in the opening day rotation. Are you buying in that Puck could make this transition back and be successful as a starting pitcher?
Yes, but I don't, you can't forget about the injury. I think you have to keep in mind, not to mention tempering workload, but on the Marlins, there are enough other pitchers that I don't think that's an issue. I think Luzardo, even though he's the horse, I don't know, do you still have injury concerns? It's been 2 years. I guess you still have to have a little bit. Mm-hmm. But with Yuri Perez, and you mentioned Garrett, you mentioned Cabrera. Cabrera's been throwing strikes. So
it's big for him. It's been a struggle.
Right. So even though Puck may be ahead of him, it's because Puck's pitching so well and not because Cabrera is struggling.
Yeah, that's true. I did take Puck late in TGFBI. Just, upside is, I see upside. Like with Benson, I don't have Puck as high as Benson, but there's a certain point where you kind of got to go chase an upside, and, there's not a lot of floor there with AJ Puck, but I still think there may be some upside even after the injuries and some of the shine has worn off. People thought he was the next Randy Johnson.
Yeah, no, exactly. There's a team with Trevor Rogers in the mix. I can see them going with a modified 6-man and having once everybody's healthy, and having Rogers be kind of the swing man, because I think there's a rotation where the extra day could help. And I need to run the numbers on this. I ran them for a tweet or an X or whatever it's called now. 4 days of rest is no longer the norm. There are just as many pitchers working on 5 days as 4, if not a little bit more. Because one of the things I like to do, and Cole Reagans is the guy that comes to mind, because he worked on 5 days rest almost exclusively. And let's see what happens when he goes to 4. But he may not go to 4, right? I mean, it may not be an issue. So I think these sort of things matter. And just now with the extended schedule and et cetera, the opener, the primary pitcher, I think I've been not so much struggling. That's not the right word. I've been very busy, so I'm a little behind Z files. Maybe that'll be my topic. I'll do some research on it and talk about the off days and find some pitchers that had a high amount of extra days and try to figure out, is that going to continue or not?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Well, one guy who's kind of getting some more buzz coming off last year is James Outman of the Dodgers. I'm not especially high on him just because, he did have a pretty nice year last year, but I guess I'm a little skeptical given the way things, the trend. It seemed like he was trending downward. Maybe he's trended back up at the end, but they have a lot of moving parts here in Los Angeles, and I just worry that I like James Outman, but he's just not a guy that I'm really chasing after. I have him. Let me see. I think I have him outside my top 200.
For those curious, we just posted the. You're listening live. We just posted it.
So I have him 205. You have him 118. So it seems like you like.
Yep. I was kind of waiting on that. Yeah.
Yeah, Outman quite a bit more than I do.
Yes. I don't as worried about the downturn towards the end of last year. If there's a negative, well, it is a negative, not if. It's a negative is that he's sitting 7th in that order. Mm-hmm. However, it's that order, right? It's going to turn around, and there are going to be times where maybe one of the regulars is sitting and out and moves up. I think he's in because of his defense, and I saw enough in the underlying skills that I think there's some improvement coming. And again, this is more about my style, about taking it safe early and maybe taking chances. Outman is 8th, 9th, 10th round. I'm kind of taking my chance there. So I am pretty high on James Outman. He does the power speed combo. So if you don't happen to get, and I'm not getting a lot of speed early, he kind of helps me fill the blank there too.
Yeah, I see it. I kind of liked him last year. Maybe I need to circle back because there is real skill there. And maybe he's just getting lost in the shuffle with me with so many great players on that team. He just kind of fades into the background a little bit in that lineup. We had a question. I want to get to Andy's question in the chat real quick. Your thoughts on Luis Rengifo? He is in the top 300 roundtable rankings at 276. So he's not a guy who really, you and I have him. I have him 345. You have him 294. So neither of us really love Luis Rengifo, but he does have that eligibility at, I believe, 4 positions.
Yeah.
Let me double check. Second base, shortstop, third base, outfield. So that's a big selling point. Is it enough to get you to draft a guy like Luis Rengifo in the end game, though?
He's one of those guys where if you strictly scout by StatCast, you can poke holes left and right, but he gets it done. So I've actually come up from where I was on Rengifo. And plus, it's like, if you have Rengifo as the major league team, you're always looking to upgrade him. I don't think the Angels are looking to upgrade him at this point. When they did not trade him for which Dodger pitcher? The owner turned it down or whatever.
Yeah. The Angels owner nixed it, right? Artie Moreno.
Yeah.
I forget who it was for.
Yeah, for a good starting pitcher.
Yeah.
So I just I'm warming to him, and a lot of it is the eligibility. I'm warming to him in the Raz Slam because eligibility really, really helps. And on that Angels lineup, he'll hit higher in the order. And Angel Stadium, well, he's a switch hitter. Well, it'll still help him a lot. Excuse me, because it's really a home run haven for lefties. And as a switch hitter, he'll get that whenever he's facing righty. So, yeah, I should probably be a little higher on Rengifo than I am.
Yeah, I guess for me, it's always tough. And we've talked about this in the past. It's tough for me to quantify that multi-positional eligibility. Like, how much is that actually worth? And you've written about it.
Yes. I put numbers to it because that's what people want me to do. Mm-hmm. But it still works. The answer is like $2 or $3. So yeah. But the idea being, he doesn't earn it, but you can add $2 or $3 of profit to your lineup at other spots.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah. And but so how do you account for that? You pay an extra $1 for him, right? Because you're not paying for the others. So, but I think he's maybe just a little bit better than I think he is. And he's one of those guys where, based upon his style, maybe I wish he didn't. Well, his strikeout rate, 18% last year. So that's not really it. It's just, I don't know. Maybe it's that for that style, I wish he hit more grounders and got more hits and didn't try to hit 36% fly ball. It's kind of one of those tweeners. Either hit fly balls or hit ground balls. When you're in the middle, the BABIP's a little low and the home runs are a little low. And he doesn't run very well, 6 out of 10. But when you're 6 out of 10, it doesn't take much to improve that percentage and run a little bit. But I don't know. I maybe talked myself into him, but there's always someone just a little bit more. I like just a little bit more. But I see the case.
I hear you, man. I hear you. Well, by the way, I just got word that as we were talking, the new roundtable went live. So if you're listening, definitely check that out. RotoWire.com/pod for a 10 I don't know how long the trial is nowadays, but for a free trial. And I think the roundtable is such a great tool because it kind of levels things out. You see the range of rankings. If you want to know how high you need to jump Bryce Miller to get him, you can look at my ranking there. See
I'm
guys
pretty high on him too.
Yeah, the high end, the low end, everything in between, and just having a median rank helps eliminate those outlier rankings. And but you can still see those outlier rankings, so it's a really great tool. Definitely check it out. And one guy who's making some waves, Todd, in spring training is Giants' new addition, Jung-Hoo Lee. 25-year-old, of course, making the jump to Major League Baseball this year. How about this for a start? 6 for 13 with a homer and a stolen base already this spring. So he's batting .462. It is spring training, but does this little sample kind of make you more confident that Jung-Hoo Lee can, not only contribute at the major league level, but be a fantasy asset?
By my, I'm 100 spots lower than anybody else. So that I'm not changing anything because of the spring at all. And we, on one hand, we can't say spring spats mean nothing, and on the other, justify a pick because he's got a hot spring. I just don't. He needs to prove to me that the ridiculously good plate skills that he showed in Korea can translate. And by that, I mean fanning under 10%, less than 10% of the time. And his career walk rate was around 8%, which is around league average in MLB. But the last couple of years, it was around 11%. So, and there's a lot of wiggle room within that even if it's 15% strikeout and 9% walk, that's still really good. But let's see in that park, he's going to hit more triples than homers, I think, right? With the triple Sally there. Is he going to run?
I saw him get into that homer the other day. Kind of more pop than I was really expecting. Now, it obviously wasn't at Oracle Park where he hit that homer, but maybe there's more power in here than people give him credit for.
Maybe, but I don't know.
We don't really know.
So I might be a little low, but I need to see it on a player like Lee. I'm surprised that I'm this much lower than everybody else, but I am fairly confident with where I have him. So I have him 340. So I would be drafting him in the 22nd or 23rd round. Maybe that does feel a little low now that I think about it, because I wouldn't mind him as my fifth outfielder, but just where things come out.
The guy I took in TGFBI after I already had Will Smith at the catcher position, I took Francisco Alvarez, and I now have him just outside the top 100, 109. I guess I've never really been in the past the guy to take two early catchers, but I love Will Smith, and I just think the price on Francisco Alvarez is right. Getting that power from the catcher position, I love the thought of it. I know he was talking about, breaking their record, Mike Piazza's record for home runs as a catcher. I'd love to see it. Are you inclined to take a guy like Alvarez, even though he's, young and unproven for the most part?
Yes, but it's kind of, if I'm in that mindset, I'm looking for Cal Raleigh. And if I don't get Raleigh, then Alvarez gets into the mindset. But it often is, once Raleig's gone, Alvarez is gone a couple picks later, and I don't get either of them, sort of thing. But I absolutely, I agree with what you're saying. And I'm getting a couple of, I don't mind getting a couple of decent catchers. We've talked about it. I mean, everybody talked about it. The pool is extended, but the back end is still terrible.
It is.
So, you can wait a little longer to get your second pretty good catcher. And even, even at the back end, if I end up with Fortes or Connor Wong, I'm not crying about it. But if there happens to be a guy you happen to like at that end, but I don't want the 29th and 30th either, which some people are doing, and that's fine.
We had a question from Famous Jay in the chat, wondering how we feel about Giancarlo Stanton. Now, he did make the roundtable, but only Eric and I have him inside the top 300. You do not, and nor does Jeff Erickson. He showed up to camp looking more like a baseball player than a professional wrestler, bodybuilder. But it hasn't meant anything on the field now. It's spring training. I know, we don't put really any stock into that. But you're kind of just done with Stanton. It seems
no. This is interesting. I think this is a great point, talking about the roundtable. Jeff and I, we do projections, right? And we plug our numbers into a calculator, and I don't want to say we base it off of that, but that's our foundation. You and Eric are more about, this is where I would draft him, right? I think Stanton is the perfect example to draft him. And because the problem with valuation is the valuation assumes he's in the lineup and no one else is, and he's going to get hurt.
Mm-hmm.
So you prorate, if we did like the Steamer version of our own rankings, Stanton, Steamer 600 version, he would go up. So I love drafting Stanton this year. I'll use him when he's healthy. And when he's not healthy, I'll replace him. And if he's hitting 209 and not hitting home runs, I'll replace him as well. So I think I love Giancarlo Stanton as a back end guy with, as long as you have a parachute in case or a replacement when it comes to injury. But that's better reflected in your rankings. Now, this isn't to say that I shouldn't take the time and adjust players of that nature. And maybe that's, note to self, adjust players of that nature,
Well, I think you make a really good point, because there is that just kind of hole in the evaluation process where we see a number next to Stanton and we just say, okay, but that's not the whole story. You're going to have a replacement in there for the time that he misses.
Yeah, right.
So it's kind of a tough thing to really figure out exactly how much a guy's worth. But even despite this 1-for-15 start to the spring for Stanton, I do kind of like the possibility of maybe plugging him into a UT spot, or because at the end, because it seems like everybody's hands off now. Everybody's out on Stanton. And of course, it's the time when everybody's out that he'll have a resurgent year and hit 40 homers. But we'll see. I do, I like that he's made changes to his routine to try to stay on the field. That's at least something. We'll see on Giancarlo Stanton. I don't really have anybody else on my list. I did lower Chris Bryant a little bit. I bumped up Ahmed Rosario, I think I mentioned. Brendan Donovan. Gavin Williams I lowered a little bit. Anybody else? Robert Suarez I raised, but he's kind of having a rough spring. Still don't really know how to value Robert Suarez. Anybody else that's been on your mind? Oh, I added Brian Abreu, by the way. I know he's going to be suspended for a couple of games, but I actually like him in a 15-team league. Brian Abreu is kind of a guy to shorten your staff a little bit. Kind of like the idea of shortening a game, but you just shorten your staff by plugging in a guy, keeping him in there all season long, and he's kind of like what his new teammate Josh Hader used to be, in that he's a 100 strikeout reliever with great ratios. So, as your pitcher 8, I think he's a guy you can just kind of leave in and let him be. But anybody else on your mind today?
Yeah, you mentioned Abreu. I loved Abreu when he was Ryan Presley's backup, because I'm a little concerned about Presley. I still honor Abreu for all the reasons you mentioned, but we just don't have that next in line for saves. True. With Presley being left next in line.
I just think there is still a little bit of an inefficiency with these really high, real high strikeout middle relievers.
No, absolutely. Especially in today's game, they're even more necessary. This past week, it's not a secret. I work with ESPN with projections, and talking to Tristan Cockcroft, he had questions about some of the projections, etc. So those are more of the names that I have that Tristan kind of talked me into being a little more aggressive or backing off a little bit. And to be honest, the number one guy was Shohei Ohtani, and he's not going to bat 155 games. He's rehabbing from Tommy John, but I think I had him in the 130s. That was too pessimistic. I mean, I brought him like 145 games, which raised him up in the ranking. So that's interesting. That was a guy that I thought that brought up a little bit. Jazz Chisholm is someone that I brought him up too. And after I brought him up, I read you mentioned about Stanton. Chisholm's like cutting out fast food, hiring a trainer. And we hear these stories all the time, right? But when I hear, and at this point, we have to decide on our own, forget what we do for whatever. We have to decide what's news and what's noise. But hearing Jazz Chisholm with all that talent and all that swagger say, I need to get my butt in better shape. I like that. I'd like to hear that. So, and if it keeps him on the field, I think that's so I think Chisholm raised Chisholm a little bit little bit more there. Let's see. A lot of these
you raised
time.
Wyatt Langford, didn't you?
Well, yeah, and it's I think I still don't know where to go with him. Where I initially had him was way too low, but again with Langford it has to do. There's that. Well, if he doesn't make the team, I'll cut him and find someone else, as opposed to giving him. I didn't have enough, even without making the team. I didn't have him give him enough playing time. So whatever it was, 30%, I should have had him at least 60% to get him there, and that because I think 60% at this point is more of a weighted average of maybe he doesn't come up until this point. He comes up early. I think 60% is probably pretty good. And he's the kind of guy that if you do numerical projections, his major league equivalencies just blow away the system. He doesn't. You have to calm his translation down. You can't just take it verbatim. So yeah, it just.
Last guy I'll mention here is Brian Wu. I think I need to raise him back up. I love Bryce Miller on that team, but Brian Wu looked fantastic yesterday. Really looked dominant. So don't forget about Brian Wu either. But yeah, great stuff.
To throw a pitcher in there, and again, this is not numerical. You have to read between the lines. But when I hear Shane Bieber went to Driveline and picked up a couple MPHs, whatever. But it's Shane Bieber.
Yeah.
If you name a pitcher that you want to see get, the smart enough, okay, he's now figured out how to throw a few less miles per hour, but he's getting it back. So I'm interested. I mean, he was already pretty good, But I for me, this is more news than noise that Bieber went to Driveline, so he went up.
Yeah, and that's kind of one of the reasons I raised the Med Rosario too. He went to Driveline as well and seemed to maybe get his swing right. So kind of a little bit of appealing to authority with the Rays, and Med Rosario doesn't even necessarily have a set spot on the diamond, but we liked him a few years ago as a prospect, and may still be something there. Well, great stuff today, Todd. Always appreciate it. And thank you all for hanging out with us in the chat. Anything else you want to say before we sign off?
Tout Wars is coming up, and I don't think I'll be around next weekend to plug it. So follow my feed, follow Tout Wars. We got a bunch of ways to follow it. And I don't know if
I'll be there next weekend. I can't wait.
Yeah, maybe we'll do the pod together from New York, or maybe they're replacing us. I don't. We're still working on it. But if it's not me, Tout Wars. The weekend, March, St. Patrick's Day weekend, bunch of ways to follow it.
Yeah, I can't wait to see you and everybody else at Tout Wars. I, got my room booked and everything's booked, so I can't wait to be there. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you, Todd, and we will be back with you next week, most likely, Todd and I, on the RotoWire Fantasy Baseball Podcast, brought to you by Fantrax.